first speaker is Pavel Abdur-Rahman, and we were chatting a little bit before this. He's going to be presenting on Canada's $1 trillion data economy, breaking the barriers, creating the value. And I think this is, well, what can you say about a great opening presentation, but show me the money. Pavel?
Thank you so much, Jim. Am I coming clear to you?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you for the organizers as well as the sponsors, and thank you for all the listeners for giving me some time this morning. You know, as I was thinking about what's the right topic to perhaps help us get started, I kept thinking about why that all of us are involved in this specialization, and my personal conclusion is that we have an opportunity in front of us. As a country, as different provinces, industries, and of course, the different technology services, and as well as boutique and niche partners. And the opportunity for all of us as Canadians, and I know there's some folks listening that are not Canadians, but the opportunity for us is $1 trillion data economy. And I do put a question mark there because it's an opportunity. And I want to kind of share some perspective with you, how we can all participate and break the barriers that we have to do to create value for all by 2030. So my name is Pavel Abdur-Rahman. I lead IBM Canada's data, AI, and blockchain transformation consulting service. I'm based out of Toronto and speaking to you from my sunroom in Port Credit. I see lots of trees outside the windows as Jim was talking about what's my workspace look like. All right, so with that, I'll get started. What I thought I'd do, just to set the context for all of you, share some information that we continuously collect. This is just hot off the press. The CIO study for 2021 just came out 2 weeks ago. We spoke to 2,500 CIOs in 29 industry and 45 locations globally. In parallel, we also spoke to 2,500 CTOs, Chief Technology Officers, as part of this sort of inaugural CTO study. And I would be sharing some content for you that kind of gives you what is the market, industry, and these executives and their teams trying to accomplish. And then I will frame the opportunity at the back end of this presentation. We've been doing this since 2003, and we are continuously listening to the market. We spoke to more than 50,000 senior executives. So our point of view and our consolidation of information is certainly industry as well as market driven. So the CIO revolution, I am going to focus a little bit on the CIO, and we'll touch on some CTO organization because I think at the moment, while the topic of all the technology topics is important, but I think leadership as well as skills and talent is going to be the key component from our perspective as we progress through this journey. The chapter 1 for the CIO revolution was unprecedented change and opportunity, right? Technology leaders are actually emerging as the strategy leaders. Chapter 2 was all around collaboration at crossroads, different types of operational and financial benefit delivery. And now we find ourselves in chapter 3, and the CIOs are actually finding their mandates and understanding those mandates from their leadership, from their board, as well as from their market is going to be super important for success. What's interesting is, you know, how are each leaders thinking of each other, and how are they thinking about that? There is this sort of tension as well as a healthy competition that's happening. So I thought this was an interesting way to explain, you know, if you ask the CIO, what do they think the most important roles are? And obviously, CIOs think CIOs are very important, and COO and CFO and CTOs. If you ask the same question to CEOs, CFO and COO are important, but so are CIO and CTO, Chief Information Officer and Chief Technology Officer. And if you ask the question to the CTOs, what do they think is important? And we can kind of see the CTO, COO, CIO kind of dimension. So the key thing that I wanted you to kind of look at that, at the top of the house in every organization, there is this tension, and some of it is actually very healthy. But we need to kind of understand what each of the organizations are trying to do and how are they dealing with that tension at the top of the house. So let's just frame the key responsibilities that we are starting to see as we spoke to about 5,000 CIOs and CTOs around the world. The technology function is actually expanding and it's diversifying, and the roles are clear in some organizations. In some organizations that, as we see, are not so much. We see CIOs focused on a broad set of responsibility with lots of stakeholders: supply chain, workforce, end user experience, workplace enablement, and so on, including data governance and compliance. And then we kind of see CTO focus on a core set of responsibility like technology strategy, operations, and architecture. What's interesting is that there is actually a shared responsibility, and that's where a lot of magic is happening. At the same time, that's where a lot of confusion also happening in some of our industry participants. For example, who owns innovation strategy? Who owns data privacy or ecosystem strategy? The software development cycle, the cybersecurity, as well as the C-suite and board advisory. Those core responsibility at the moment are shared in some of the leading organizations between the CIO and the CTO stakeholders. Obviously, wanted to acknowledge how critical the CIOs played the role during the pandemic, right? 77% of the CIOs report that their teams played a vital role in their organization's pandemic response. However, only 23% believe that those changes are going to be permanent, right? So we kind of need to understand the context and the backdrop of COVID and how each of the organizations are progressing. And I hope everybody listening, wherever they are, wherever you are safe and sound. There is obviously this emerging variant that's causing some more concerns over the next couple of months. So how did the organizations react in the last 3 years? Lot of changes and a lot of adaptations that the CIO organizations are doing. The top items have been hybrid cloud operations, which shouldn't be a surprise to anybody, but as well as digital process automation and intelligent workflows. I want to highlight data insights and AI here because it is a data and analytics conference. And the interesting thing is what we saw in the last sort of 12, 18, 24 months, the amount of organizations are moving from their on-prem legacy data states and infrastructure to their target state architecture. And I'll touch on a little bit more about that once I kind of set the context for a little bit further. When we ask those 5,000 leaders, 2,500 CIOs and 2,500 CTOs, what are the technology that is going to make a significant impact in the business results? And it's an interesting view here. If you look at the next 2 to 3 years, cloud computing, which includes data clouds, IoT and analytics and AI and 5G are all very important, and I hope that's not a surprise to any one of you. And how that could change in the 5 to 10 years realm. And the way I read this is that next 2 to 3 years is going to be so important in the data cloud journey for most organization, so that organization can actually drive more value from all that digital exhaust that all of these technologies are creating, and how they can actually monetize both internally and externally. And this would be the time where, if organizations do not make these leaps, in 2 to 3 years, there would be some significant challenges that they will face. And what we're seeing leading organizations are doing, setting up the foundation for that journey and start to focus on monetization, both internal and external, and participate in the overall data economy of a country, or as well as a region. So CIOs are driving significant value with activating this data. So when we ask these questions, 79% of the CIOs reported that their teams are devoting significant time in extracting value from data. If you look at these questions that we ask around data governance practices across ecosystem, 80% are focused on that. Almost 79% focusing on extracting value from data, and I'm going to touch on a little bit more how we are seeing some of that working. 79% are also mining employee data as well, not just customer data, for workforce productivity. Customer data insight to meet unmet needs, to figure out where the next demand point is going to come from. Focusing on generating insights independent of data products. So we will touch on a little bit more about that. Effectively integrating data, both from inside as well as outside of the organization. And then finally, focusing on monetizing insight from different types of properties, digital properties. So just wanted to kind of share that with you. These were the key themes that we saw when we asked the organization's data strategy. So as technologies are growing in scale and speed, we are also seeing significant value creation with automation. When we talked about extended intelligent workflow as the golden thread of value creation, we saw 40% of IT processes are being automated, 35% in manufacturing and finance workflows, 30% of customer engagement, supply chain, cybersecurity, and marketing. In fact, I'm actually spending a lot more time around cybersecurity and the intersection of cybersecurity, data, and AI applications, both an organization's internal requirements as well as regulatory requirements. 25% of HR, risk, and R&D are also getting automated, and procurement, up to 20% of workflows are getting automated. So CIOs are kind of using these extended intelligent workflows and hybrid cloud to be able to drive the business value that their leaders and their teams are asking for. The tech leader's goal is interesting, because I think to create this magic with extended intelligent workflow, organization needs to set up the underpinning of tech, the data, the integration, and the orchestration layer, speed up the benefit, and that's where really hybrid cloud and advanced analytics really come into play. The productivity benefits, both from an efficiency as well as collaboration and experimentation dimension, and then eventually the value that's going to be delivered through the work processes, both from incremental to exponential use cases. Organizations that are kind of making the CIO and CTO collaboration as a priority are definitely leading from our analysis of the data that we saw. Organization almost 20% higher than average on their technology investments that are having the CIO CTO collaboration, almost 26% with greater maturity in cloud, AI, and automation, and almost 36% organizations with greater agility and effectiveness in their data management, governance, and resiliency. So this CIO and CTO collaboration is going to be super important to watch for, and we are using those as a benchmark as we engage with different clients. So what are the 6 sort of key drivers that we're now starting to see? That's the combination of the CIO CTO contribution to the business. So many CIO responsibilities are focused on people, process, and technology. And many CTOs are focused on strategic impact around purpose, partnerships, and innovation. So data integration and orchestration are connecting the 6 value drivers. And by working together, both technology leaders are really making a significant impact. So in our view, data integration and orchestration are going to be the key dimension to watch for with those 6 drivers in mind. So, where is tech making an impact? Wouldn't want to read all of those key criteria to you, but I do want to highlight, maybe a couple of them. 42% of the CIOs told us that over the next 3 years, technology would have a significant impact on sustainability initiatives. I also want to kind of highlight security and risk, and also the employee experience, which is going to be a very important theme given what's happening to the world with the Great Resignation. Employee experience is going to be important in this mostly hybrid remote work world. So let me sort of touch on I hope that was helpful to set the context of the CIO, CTO responsibility and how they see their organizations, where we see majority of the technology budget being spent, and how are they monetizing? Well, in our view, different organizations are in different state in their journey. The level of innovation and the business impact correlates to that journey. I would frame it as internal data monetization. That's kind of making sure the internal data is in a good place. These are things like moving from your current, legacy in data environment to target state, making sure things are on a hybrid cloud environments, starting to merge internal and external data. Starting to create data and digital platforms, capabilities, and also next generation operating models. Those are critical functionality and capability that we see our leading organizations doing. Internal data monetization becomes the first value path to value related business cases. But shortly, we're starting to see some organization, I would say 20 to 30% of the organization that we work with are starting to focus on external data monetization. And then eventually about 10 to 12%, I would say, are focused on data ecosystem orchestration. And if you think about that, I'll share some Stats Canada facts with you. In 2018, there was an experimentational estimate done by Stats Canada that kind of tried to figure out what is the value of data in Canada. And their estimate was about $217 billion in 2018. And their estimate was that in databases, as well as data science, all types of analytics and AI products are kind of making this $217 billion value, which kind of grew since 2015, almost 400%. And if you think about that, where we find ourselves in at the end of 2021 with COVID, I believe that that has accelerated about $300 to $400 billion worth of value. So the question at the beginning of this keynote was, could we get to $1 trillion data economy by 2030? And I certainly hope that as organizations move from their current state to target state, and as they start to monetize data internally as well as externally, as a society, as a country, we can build up this trillion-dollar economy. Well, what's the one thing that I wanted to share with you that's a little bit detailed around modern data platforms? No organization, both public or private, can really participate in the data economy without building modern data platforms. And some of the key guiding principles, and that we can talk a little bit more in specific later on a Q&A. I just wanted to highlight these 6 things that we're seeing, right? Rooted in cloud, purpose-built data ops and ML ops, machine learning enabled data quality, looking at data as a product, eventually to the goal of looking at data as a financial asset on a balance sheet, very domain driven, both functional as well as industry, and then consumption and self-service. Right? Those are the key sort of guiding principles that we are seeing leading organizations are implementing to build modern data platforms. So to kind of wrap a little bit here, I wanted to kind of bring us together on sort of a couple of recommendations for CIOs, CTOs, and all the listeners. Seize the opportunity here. Right, the technology leadership would have significant influence. So right now is a time to seize that opportunity, seize that seat at the board in the leadership circles, define your purpose and mission, champion the role, and track results that matter. The reason why I wanted to frame this conversation as a $1 trillion Canadian data economy. Well, we can all rally behind that because every citizen, every customer, and every company would benefit from that rising of the tide. Well, and the second thing here is, well, we have to address complexity head on. There are a lot of complexity in the legacy environments that needs, capability to be able to boost that value. It needs integration, orchestration, and collaboration among multiple groups of people at the top of the house, CIO and CTOs. Connecting those dots and unleashing talent by eliminating roadblocks. It sounds simple, but to be honest with you, technology is the easiest thing in this game. Those collaboration, those teams coming together and delivering key milestones. That's where we see a lot of leading organizations thrive. And then become a force multiplier, right? By delivering innovation technology processes and inspiring people, that golden thread that I touched on a couple of slides ago, I believe that's the way forward. And I believe, all of the investment that every organization is making with the digital transformation, the exhaust coming out of those digital transformation is all of that data, and our ability to monetize it both internally with different types of applications, analytics and AI applications, and then creating data products and basically being able to orchestrate ecosystems around those organizations and eventually overall the economy. We can increase our influence and push this forward. So to summarize, I think it's the migrate, modernize, and monetization era, and we have a wonderful opportunity ahead of us. So with that, I will pause, and hopefully this was helpful, and happy to answer any questions.
Very cool. Thank you very much, Pavel. That was great. We are getting questions in here. So this audience is, as I said in my technical terms, this audience rocks. They've got some good questions for you. Let me know this. I'm just going to toss a couple of them to you in there. So the key trends into 2023. Are you seeing any of those that you'd like to mention? And are there any specific industries that are spending more on data solutions than others?
Yeah, I would say, financial service. I know this is a Western Canada crowd, but the financial services, the B2C organizations, a lot of sort of cloud native companies, they're certainly leading around taking data heads on, right? But I also am starting to see a lot of discussions and conversations and movement in the West, particularly in Alberta, as well as British Columbia, around embracing data clouds, around embracing the last frontier. I always say to CIOs and leaders that attacking and addressing the data problem of your organization would require significant leadership, because it is the last frontier. A lot of people have moved to cloud, a lot of people have modernized their applications, but a lot of people did not try to solve the data challenges. And I think we're kind of coming to a crossroad now that hundreds of millions and billions have been spent on digital transformation, but leaders cannot show the return on that investment, because all those digital applications creating the data exhaust that is not being monetized, both internally and externally. So I'm starting to see some leaders are taking that head on.
So it started to talk about not just monetization, but valuation. That Stats Can thing. Are you going to can you post a link to that or anything where people can find that?
Absolutely. And feel free to Google it as well. I'm happy to share a link here as well.
Happy, yeah.
Yeah, Google Stats Canada 2018 Canadian data value. Those would be the right keywords, and you will get to a thick document. But that was a very interesting study in 2018, and I would love to see the next version of that study.
Yeah, and I'm one with the Google, so I'll find that, and I'm sure everybody else is in there as well. Obviously a great presentation, because everybody wants your slides. I think that they're available on the platform. I'm not sure, but we'll post a note on that for everybody in there. But it's nice, and I presume you provide autographed copies with a mere small purchase from IBM. No, I'm just kidding. The other question came in. I thought this was really good. Is how our CM, and it goes into this whole idea of integration, which I'll come back to. But the CIOs. Do you find CIOs are leveraging more than one vendor? What's the yin yang of what you're seeing there in terms of, are they using more than one vendor? Are they using one vendor a lot? Is centralizing, decentralizing? What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, if you get to the root of the issue, I think there's basically two things, right? One is the technology architecture of where are you heading? Right. So there's a lot of conversation, a lot of jockeying, a lot of speculation. But at the end of the day, everybody needs to make a decision that this is my target state architecture, and this is where we are going. Right. And some organizations taking longer to make that call. But what I have seen in the last 6 months, a lot more faster decisions that we are going to this target state architecture with multiple technology stack, and this is where we will be by 2023, 2024. We will be decommissioning our current, and here is our blueprint, right? So assume leaders are working on that. Then the second thing, Jim, is really about talent, right? There's a massive shortage of talent.
Huge.
At all layer. Obviously at the working team layers, the data engineers, the data developers, the data scientists, but also mid-management and senior management, with great resignation as the backdrop, with remote work. There's a massive shortage of talent. So then it comes down to a CIO or a CTO. Who do they have a relationship with, so that they can feel secure that mandate they just declared, that we will get there by 2023 and 2024? How will they actually achieve it? Do they have a set of relationships that kind of make sure, hey, we're going to have 200, 300, 400 people available to you, near shore, offshore, as well as local consultants and so on, so that we can get this done. And we're seeing different flavor. We're starting to see ecosystem of partners. Like, for example, IBM would partner up with boutique as well as other partners on client by client basis to deliver on that mandate, because we know that how difficult it's going to be, because it's not a demand issue. It's actually a supply side issue. So, all of us are kind of making those bets that here's our ecosystem and here's how we're going to deliver that value.
Yeah, and if I can just question or editorialize a bit on this, you used to have the theory you have one person, one throat to choke. Sorry, that was through there, and now you're seeing a lot more partnerships in there. But also, there's got to be a role for someone who orchestrates that. I'll use the orchestration word again. It's really, it used to be the prime contractor. Now you really are starting to see people looking for partnerships where you can get somebody who could orchestrate all these different partners. Are you seeing that as a trend?
Absolutely, Jim. I'm just finishing sort of 2 large deals, one in airline industry, and the second one is in insurance industry. I'm also having some conversation with some of my respected clients in Calgary. It's going to be all about who are the hyperscaler, who are the orchestrator, and the system integration is still going to be super important, and who are your boutique industry or platform specific partners. And here is a gang of 5 strong companies that meets the bill, and those 5 leaders are working with the CIO and CTO as a team, and that is going to be the winning thing.
Yeah, and this came up this morning. I'm gonna go back to the other question, but I just want to ask this because it just came up in a discussion with another CIO this morning. That was integration, and I walk into your presentation and bang, integration again. This is when you see it twice in the same day, and I've been talking about it. Why are you so passionate about that? I could get that in your voice when you were talking about it.
The reality is, Jim, I think if we have the right growth mindset right now. We have $1 trillion of data economy to build, and we don't have enough talent. The world doesn't have enough talent, right? So in my mind, right now is the time to partner up with the like-minded people, with the right skill set. Of course, economics has to make sense, right? We're still in business, but we have $1 trillion of economy to build, and the Stats Canada actually talked about in 2018, the $217 billion value data, right? In 2018, that was 2/3 of our natural resources, like 2/3 of all the barrels, and equal to all IP in Canada. That was 2018. So we have so much to gain by partnering and making sure we're actually delivering, right? Because otherwise nobody wins.
Well, yeah, and it's like, remember what Brenda Stronach used to say? It's not it's not getting a bigger piece of the pie; it's making the pie bigger. And I think that's part of where this integration, I think, does that. Got a great question from someone. What do you think about the data economy and expanding investment in data analytics? One of the keys, making data actionable and understandable by executive audiences. Yeah. What's your tip for making data understandable and actionable? And I love the actionable word.
Yeah, it's a great. All right. Okay.
Actionable and understandable. And I love this. If data is actionable, you can get the value from it. What's some tips that you might have for people doing that?
It's a great question. I would say, I keep talking about education and awareness. So at all level, board level, C-suite level, working group level. So education, awareness. I talk about path to value, Jim, right? So if we are creating an application or a product, what is the value that we're all committing to, right? If you think about the startup world, they actually have a value to create and a run rate, right? I mean, we got to get to an X number of valuation and we have 12 months. And everybody's motivated to deliver on that, right? And I think we could use some of that in the enterprise and both in the public sector as well as private sector, right? Here's the value we're all committing to, and here's our runway, and here's our burn rate. And if you can orient ourselves towards that, I think we will only do actionable things.
Yeah. Yeah, it might be that we actually do more actionable things than we think. I'm just going to pose this to you because I got this another buddy of mine from actually curiously from IBM who posed this to me. Said if you don't benchmark, if you don't set a benchmark and measure your progress, you'll never get anywhere. And I think sometimes we're afraid to set that benchmark and then measure the progress and then tell the story. I think, I don't, maybe people are a little shy in our business sometimes about getting out there and saying, look, here's some value that we brought in there. Do you find that to be the case?
Absolutely, Jim. I would say the leaders that are going to take this head on are the first ones that are asking for benchmarks. Mm-hmm. Because they're basically saying, I'm going to take this on. I'm going to contribute to the overall data economy. It's going to be hard because it's not as sexy as talking about an AI application. Right, in the analogy of building a house, nobody wants to fix the plumbing, right? Everybody wants to build the shining wall. So the leaders that want to take that on, the first thing they do is they benchmark because they know that's going to be in their favor to build a story.
Yeah, and build a believable story in there. And they're just so. And just we get some other questions coming in. I want to ask you another piece in there, and it was on one of your slides. Was data integration orchestration? Now we talked about integration. This is the great integration moment, I think, for everybody, and that's great. And I love the fact that we're having more sophisticated conversations now. But you also put orchestration in there in that context. What did you mean by orchestration there? I mean, I'm the geek. I'm thinking of orchestration and containers and stuff like that, but you had a different meaning, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking more like, if you think about what we're doing, we talk about digital economy. In my mind, digital economy is building the bridges and the roads. The data economy is when the data is actually flowing through that infrastructure, right? So value chain from left to right. So when I'm talking about orchestration, in the future data economy, organization that will basically become the orchestrator of the data flow from their supplier to their customer, as well as their competition, then create net new data products, as well as AI and analytics products that they're going to charge to. That's in my mind is really the where we are all heading. And I'll give you an example. We're working with Yara, which is a large agriculture company, very similar to Nutrien in Norway, and they're kind of creating data products for farmers and for different types of seed producers by creating a platform where farmers are now kind of starting to share information, right, on how each of their individual lands are doing. And based on that local weather information, what kind of seed and fertilizer combination would increase their yield. So Yara, which was basically a seed company, now becoming a data product company, and driving the value, and we need more sustainable agriculture, right? So in my mind, that's the orchestration that every entity could eventually become once they lay the groundwork for all the digital infrastructure.
Yeah, and I guess in this economy, if you don't know what you're transforming into, you've got a problem.
You've got a problem.
Yeah. In terms of that, we're all going to be. I mean, we've talked about this for decades. I know how young I look, but I've been doing this like for 40 years. I've heard this. Data's any day now. And this is we are there in terms of data is finally has a value. And remember, we used to be talking about valuing intangibles, and now we got StatsCan valuing intangibles. I think we've arrived when that happens in there. A couple of things though, but taking this forward, one of the audience members asked a question about data as a service. Where does the as a service market play into all of this? In there, it's huge. We can't ignore it. But
yeah, I mean, there's lots of examples that we could look at how different companies are creating data products. Like I'll just give you a big one that comes to my mind right away. It's actually a government entity that's creating, obviously within all the privacy and regulatory requirements, course. I think that's, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention, Jim. Why, the data economy is exciting, but why in Canada it's exciting is because I think Canada will do it hopefully the right way for the world, right? Within the regulatory, privacy, and ethical requirements, right? Because that's the brand for Canada globally, right? So this government entity is actually creating data products for an insurance industry. And so a government entity will now start to have a revenue associated with data that an insurance and financial institution company can actually consume and create better product and prices for the end consumer and citizens. And that now creates a very good virtuous cycle. So that's just the first example that came to my mind. But I would kind of challenge any one of us listening in whatever organization, whether it's oil and gas or agriculture or financial services or telco. And telco is a great example, right? A lot of telco are creating data products for municipal and government planning, for example. So I would challenge that every organization that is going through digital transformation should be thinking about what kind of net new data products can we create as a revenue line item, not for internal cost reduction. And this trend, Jim, is actually a lot more aggressive in Asia.
Really?
And yes, and I think when in some of the clients and organizations that I have exposure to, I'm looking at them and I'm kind of starting to reflect that when they think about technology, they think about revenue growth. And in Canada or Western Europe, when we think about technology in the enterprise world or the government world, we think about cost reduction, right? And I think we could get a better balance on that spectrum.
Yeah, and that might finally be that moment of where, because CIOs have a great expectation now. I noted your slide said that they have taken a new role, and everybody who's a CIO knows that in there. But it's almost like, hey, what do we do next? It's like, what's our next act here? Because we all succeeded in keeping all our enterprises together, big, small, across the country. Everybody got everybody back to work in record time because of all the dumb stuff we'd been doing of connecting and all those geeky things we'd been talking about. Hey, they work. So ta-da. But now what the next thing we do is, I think, is get that focus on revenue. And if what I'm hearing you say is this might be the time to partner up with in your business to say, what data, how can we take data and make that a revenue item?
100%, Jim. I talked to 2 CIOs in Calgary, top clients, and they all said last 2 years was just, surviving. Next 2 years is all going to be around, attacking the data problems in their organizations. And it's going to start with small, simple things, right? Some senior discussions around what's the playbook and the blueprint for our journey, right? It's going to be incremental, and we don't recommend, big bang approach. It's going to be an incremental journey. It's going to be necessary to create a targeted architecture and a method and a blueprint how to go from today to tomorrow. It's going to require persuasion of stakeholders, both business executives as well as board level executives, to kind of commit to something like that. And then it's going to be important to find a talent that's going to be both internal and external, in an ecosystem manner, that this is how we're going to start to show some value. In my mind, that's the high level sort of structure that I see most of the strategy.
It's a real challenge, and I'll say this, when we talk about moving from being focused on efficiency and cost savings. Well, as CIOs, we managed a constrained resource, and so many times we were trying to limit scope. Let me limit the scope so I can shrink. That's gone. And anybody who doesn't realize that's gone is in trouble. But now we still have a constrained resource. We have a challenge of resourcing, but we have to be more open in terms of looking for opportunity rather than managing scope. That's a tough challenge.
It's definitely complex. We're advising a couple of CIOs on their blueprint for 2022, and Jim, I would say it's not easy. Right. However, I think the platform and the microphone is there now. And I think CIOs and CTOs should start to collaborate and take the problems head on.
Yeah, I think this collaboration piece is there. Got one more question in here. Great questions coming in here. Did you find that modernization will expand your capabilities more so than save you money? I think part of what we talked about. Another way to look at it, did we see new workflows from new tech? Oh, that's interesting.
It is interesting. I kind of simplify migrate, modernize, monetize. People actually underestimate the modernization conversation, right? So I'll give you a quick example. We're moving a client from a legacy on-prem hardware and data state to a target state architecture, and I'm intentionally avoiding any specific technology. But that's just migration. But now that client is actually building net new data model for their customer, net new data model for their products. And that's what we mean by modernization, because it's not just moving data. Because if you just moved data but did not build your next generation data models, well, all those digital applications that's sending data now, well, you're not going to be able to run any analytics on it. Right? So modernization is very, very important. And I think it is going to create net new workflows. It is going to create opportunity for net new use cases, both for simple to complicated AI applications.
Yeah. And you said, I'm thankful for what you said, but we tended to concentrate on the technical skills, and you mentioned middle management. There's a rebirth of architecture, of the people who you have in your organization who understand the business, who understand the data, and can help bring that together. And that's that precious middle management role. You need the experience to get to that level. So I was glad you mentioned that as being a key resource, because we ignore it sometimes.
Very important. Internal tribal knowledge with data and application architecture is, to be honest, equally important to any external service partners like ourselves, who might know the latest technology, but we don't understand the nuance. So the combination of the internal external team with the right skill set is important to be able to deliver on these promises.
Great. Yeah. Put you on the spot for one more thing. What's the big mistake that you see? What's the biggest? We all come out of these conferences. we're all revved up. We want to do some. What's the big mistake that we want to avoid?
I think the big mistake we want to avoid is, having an executive sponsorship and a target state. And I'm seeing organization that lacks that. And I don't mean to put any individual CEOs on this, but I'll actually mention, because it's public. Suncor CEO. Right. If you went to Suncor's investor presentation, he publicly declares what Suncor 4.0 is going to be all about, and how him and his team is committing to that goal. I kind of use that as a sort of example of leadership and sponsorship, because that kind of trickles through. So I would say that's the one thing from a leadership perspective, Jim, and in terms of something that for all of us, I would say not learning, right? It sounds simple, but we need to continue to learn, Jim, because not only technology, but the way of working is changing, right? The way we build team is changing, where people reside is changing. So not learning is another mistake that I hope all of us can avoid.
Great. And we get a couple questions. We get 4 minutes, but they're just coming in. I don't want to ignore them here. So how to monetize data in public universities, public organization, I guess. Many tools are developed during research projects and things like that. And so how could Canadian public universities become data service providers? And you've got like 2 minutes. And there's another one, but also, it's this whole idea of how do we turn data into value, I guess, even with the constraints of the public sector.
Yeah, I think first of all, we should understand the regulatory requirements, right? Because we should not be creating, because in my mind, data is almost like a bartering, right? Jim, when we used to trade meat for strawberries, we were very explicit. We were comfortable with that trade, right? And I think some of the mistakes some of the social media giants have made is not making that. We are bartering data, but we're just not talking about it, right? So I would say, just becoming very explicit that we want to barter data. Yep. But we want to do it within the regulatory requirement. That's kind of the minimum threshold, but also the maximum, which is the brand of the entity. So whether it's a university or a private company or a government entity, here's our brand, and we're not going to compromise on that brand. If those things are there and the willingness to move forward is there, I think there's lots of opportunity to create data products. If telcos are creating data products, if municipal government agencies are creating data products, if startups, team of 5, 7, 10 people are creating data products, why would universities with great amount of information not be able to create data products?
Yeah. The best conversations are the ones that you don't want to leave. This has been fabulous, man. This has just been fabulous, and the audience has been great. Are you hanging around? Are you going to be around any networking things?
I will do my best, Jim. Absolutely, and I'd love to connect with folks. Please connect on LinkedIn. It's a pleasure to speak to you all. Have a great conference, and thank you for having me.
Thank you, man. Great start. Appreciate it a lot. Thanks.
Thanks, Jim.
All right.